Okay, I'm
Okay.
absolutely delighted today to have Francis Kiernan of Abis Energy with me on the Business Spotlight. Welcome, Francis.
Thank you very much indeed, Brenda.
So tell us who you are and what you do, please.
My name is Francis Kiernan. I'm the managing director of a company, a consultancy called Abis Energy Services, and largely we're a knowledge-based energy consultant. I bought this business in 2017, and we've gradually developed a personality, shall we say, and built success. We're headquartered in Aberdeen. And we have offices in South America, in Guyana, Georgetown in Guyana, and we have an office just about to open in Suriname, in Paramaribo.
Fantastic. So what problem do you help your customers to solve?
Well, principally, we're engaged with resource management and looking at the economics of transition. So we recognize that transition throws up a different set of problems and difficulties associated with investment. And given the recent pandemic, access to investment and focusing on investment is extremely important for our clients. We also provide consultancy services for major corporations that are looking to establish themselves, say, for instance, in Suriname and in Guyana.
Okay. So you talked about the developed a personality, you said, for the organization. Tell me about that. Is that the culture within the organization or the services you provide?
I think it's the culture within the organization. I mean, when I came into this business, I came in from corporate. I spent a lifetime in corporate. And it's one of the things I was making notes about earlier today. SMEs are not corporate business. They're very personal. Yeah. So we needed to be clear about what it was we were trying to do. And while I had lots of eminent people became involved with me, the personality of the business has largely evolved from, say, 2017 when we started to where we are today. So, for instance, this last week, we through our relationship with the Aberdeen University, we ran a series of posts related to the windfall tax, the implications of the windfall tax, and the implications are in the short, medium, and longer term in terms of investment. So it's getting to that place is not a 5-minute exercise. You know, I would say realistically, we've spent the last 5 years creating that personality.
Mm-hmm. And are you happy with it now, or is it still developing?
No, I think it's still developing. To be honest, I think that we're hitting our stride, as it were. We had aped a lot of other consultants in the marketplace, and we're a small to medium-sized consultancy. We're not Ernst & Young. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you know, what we're trying to focus on really is looking more at corporate social responsibility in the context of not just investment, but supporting, as we are doing in South America, smaller governments with smaller turnover, and getting them and focusing them on what they can do and not be bullied by, for argument's sake, major investors coming into that marketplace.
Fantastic. So tell me, you said you were making some notes on the transition from corporate to SME.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience there then.
Very sobering. I think that a lot of people who come in, some people who had been in the energy industry, when they came into the SME business, tended to bring a sense of corporate expectation with them. That just doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Very often coming into small to medium-sized enterprises, they're very personal businesses. And in my case, where you were buying and selling small to medium-sized enterprises, you needed to take account of the fact that you needed to focus on why you were buying the business, what you were buying it for. Was it a sound business? Did it have products? And you really needed to avoid getting carried away with trying to conclude the deal, as distinct from trying to actually buy something useful and to develop that. So the biggest issue would be, don't expect people to be grateful if the businesses you're buying is in trouble. And you need to pay attention.
Pay attention to?
Well, the people that you're going to recruit or you inherit as part of that business will be perhaps unsettled. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at how do you encourage them and continue to encourage them to be the best that they can. You probably need to look at the diversity of the people within that organization. You certainly need to look at their capacity to grow. Have they got a training program? Are they compliant? All those sorts of things. So while corporate life is from an experience point of view is important, SMEs are entirely different. You know, if you're looking at a business that's say 1 to 5 million turnover per annum, it's a very personal business.
Yes, yes. And what about so that's your experience working, buying and selling and working in SMEs. What about your experience of being an SME?
Well, it was a challenge, I'll be quite frank with you. I think that for me, my reputation by and large in the energy industry as a whole was my anchor. If I had not had a good reputation, if I had not delivered projects and investment and all the rest of it at a corporate level, then I wouldn't have had the support coming into SMEs. I think the other thing was that I needed to readjust to the demographics of SMEs. Very often they can be younger people, particularly in the technology side, and they have a different take on where the industry is, where it's going, what are the important aspects of, you need to be in tune and open with regard to how you're managing your business and ensure that you're sympathetic to their aspirations.
Fantastic. Great to get your perspective. So really, really interesting. What else have been your biggest learnings through your time and actually since 2017 you said, wasn't it? Yeah.
How much money it takes, how long it takes.
More money and more time than you anticipated.
Yeah, really. I mean, I think that I think it depends on what you're bringing to the party. You know, looking at small businesses, I would certainly have the intention of perhaps being able to take the business to the market in 3 to 5 years. Understanding what makes up the constituent parts that put the value in the business, that's a big learning piece. So being a nice fella and being knowledgeable is just not enough. I mean, goodwill gets you so far. So you need to be really looking at something, a hook that you can hang yourself on in the context of the business. So what are you delivering? What is the product? And we faffed about with that for a while. And I think that's when I said we've now arrived at a point where, for instance, we're modeling currently, we're modeling the outturn from the windfall tax and then the doubling down on the windfall tax, looking at the implications that has in terms of supply, recognizing that the renewables COP26 targets and the expectation for demand don't necessarily meet, and also recognizing that in a post-pandemic world, economic investment has been rationed. And it's been rationed because there are things like the war in Ukraine. There are things, there's just not the same appetite certainly for investment in oil and gas. But there is an appetite for, broadly speaking, investing in companies that reflect the modern approach, whereby you take account of renewables, where you take account of people's aspirations and what they expect.
So what would be, I guess you've got a lot of experience in business, both corporate and running this Abis Energy. What advice would you give if you could go back to your 18-year-old self? What advice would you give?
I looked at that, and that was quite interesting. And I'll read out to you what I've written down here, if I can find the damn thing. What I've written here is 18 years old. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was heading to university, and I've said, be true to yourself, first of all. Attend more lectures. I wasn't good at that. And have a plan. Don't drift. And I think that, I've got a 17-year-old son now. He was a late arrival. And what I keep saying to him is, look, find something you want to do. Don't end up getting a job in order to earn money. I mean, you've got to do that, of course, but find something you've got a passion about, and so that you're able to develop who you are as a personality. Now, I was regaling to my wife at the weekend. Him and I went out for a walk at the weekend, ostensibly to talk about him going to university. I was nervous. It was punctuated by me rattling on and him grunting. So as an 18-year-old, I think it's a challenge. I think that the other important thing I would say about being 18-year-old is not the same as when I was 18. And the opportunities are different. And the educational structure is different. I'm thinking about sophisticated apprenticeships, post-tertiary education, that sort of thing. So the biggest thing for me is have an open mind, be confident. And I suppose the thing that I would say most of all is don't be afraid.
Oh, I love that. I also have, I've got a son and a daughter at 18, and yes, I know exactly where you are. But the lesson to them and to me back then as an 18-year-old, don't be afraid. Really, very powerful.
Yeah, because it's everybody ultimately gets nervous, and anybody who tells you otherwise is telling you lies. Doing this or doing anything else that you do, speaking at big events, you still get nervous, and you hate the possibility you might dry up at the crucial time. But for kids going away, for the group of young people that have come through the pandemic, where their school and what we taught them to expect in the context of education has not been possible, and now they find themselves once again in a position where they're going into a set of higher exams, where one would argue that possibly they haven't been as well prepared as they might have been through circumstances. So the big thing for me is don't be afraid.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So who's been your best coach or mentor that you've ever had, and why? My alter ego. Tell me more.
I've always, in my corporate career, I would say I was always too intense. And inevitably what would happen to me in my corporate career was that people would come up 3 or 4 years later and say, remember all that stuff you were talking about 3 to 4 years ago? Well, we're doing it now. So I think that you need to gauge what you want to speak about, who you want to speak about it to, and you need to understand how that's going to be received. That's not to patronize people, but everybody has their own agenda. They don't come to work to further your career; they come to work to further their career. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that I think that's an important lesson.
So
have I answered the question, or am I deviating?
You might be deviating slightly. I'm going to try and understand what you're saying there. Are you suggesting that there are mentors in your career who have been doing it to further their own career rather than yours?
No, I'm saying that a bit like pick something you're passionate and don't be afraid. However, everything has a time and a space and a speed. And merely because you want to drive it because that's your particular preoccupation at that particular time, and I'm talking about this in my career, or the fact that you're able to go 1, 2, 3, 10. That's not the way it works. The process has a speed. The process has orders and has structure. And ultimately, the process will squeeze you out, as our poor former prime minister has just discovered. The process will always squeeze you out. So the big lesson, I think, in terms of mentors, I have people working with me now that would be a mentor. There's a chap that we were at Burma, then we were at BP, and then I was at Shell. And he was always, I'm good and quick, but sometimes I need somebody to stop me and say, no, look, just wait a minute. You can't go down this route. So Will Sutton would be my biggest mentor, I would say. We were both at BP and we were both vice presidents at BP. So that would be the biggest thing. Listen to yourself, really. I mean, you know yourself when you've made a mistake or you're not doing the right thing. You know, the red light comes on and starts flashing. You just need to listen to it. Don't just blunder on. And be relevant. Be relevant.
And so is it paying attention to your gut instinct?
Yeah, I think that's important. Mm-hmm. And recognize that you don't know everything. I mean, when I do work, any work I've ever done, I've always given it to other people to look at. And I don't expect them to come back and say to me, well, that's good, or this, that, and the other. I expect them to be constructive and destructive if necessary. Mm. Because I sometimes have the capacity to say 10 words when one will suffice.
We can all do that. Oh no, we can all do that. Yeah. I like that though. It's getting, because in business, at the top of your own small or medium-sized business can be lonely. So yeah, having someone to check things over or to bounce things off.
Well, some other, it's not just a question of knowledge. It's a question of personality and temperament. You need somebody that has got. I'm not a finisher, for instance. Okay. I'm not a finisher. I need finishers to tell me you can't do that, or you've got to do it 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't go 1, 2, 10. I'm not a finisher. So you need to recognize who you are, what your skill set is. And I'm not talking about if you've got a degree in physics or whatever it is you've got. What are your skill sets in terms of social and personal interaction?
That's brilliant. So as well as getting someone else to look over or to bounce off, get someone different from yourself.
Yes, very much so.
So you get diverse perspectives. Yes.
Yeah, well, again, when I was in corporate, I was never that good at accounts and finance. So I always had people that were accounts and finance with me. And the other thing was, when I came into this side, the one thing I've said to my people is always employ somebody better than you, or try to, because you're only as good as your team.
Yes. And
you've got to respect your team. And yes, you've got to respect your team. And ultimately, they have to respect you, because, you can only bluster so much. And I came from a background in the energy industry where people shouted at each other. That was quite the norm.
Mm-hmm.
So no, don't tolerate that.
So some brilliant lessons from your career there, Francis.
Thank you.
What does the next 5 years bring?
Well, I made a note about this, and I wanted to try and keep it. I wanted to try and keep it fairly short and sweet. What we want to do is we want to focus more on corporate social responsibility and the challenges that brings. And I think now that, I never thought it's a bit like you never think you see pubs close. I never thought I would see the oil and gas industry tip into decline. And I didn't think that it would be so dramatic. So when you look at Aberdeen now, you look at the number of chopper flights, or you look at the number of boats coming into the harbor. So it's been quite dramatic. So what do we want to do? I want to put something back. I want our business to be supportive of, for instance, the government in Guyana, for instance, the government in Suriname, and we work in Ghana, we work in Kenya. And I want to be able to help people to, within these environments, to understand what are the key drivers. And they're very often, if you're not experienced, you don't actually see them. Mm-hmm. So I think that social justice in the energy supply chain, and then what I want to do really is I want to exploit the intellectual property and develop an understanding of energy investment and the implications in the 21st century. And I would keep coming back to energy investment. The success and failure of transition and the speed of it will be decided by the availability of corporate and private equity investment. And we need to understand what makes, I'll give you an example. For instance, we do business in Guyana, and Exxon have a huge investment in Guyana. Exxon are a responsible company. They do an excellent job. However, the people have got to recognize, that it's a corporation. They need to make profits. They need to bring those back to their shareholders. And they also need the opportunity and space to be able to invest in things like carbon capture, in carbon trading and all that sort of thing. So getting people to understand how the business world works, particularly in Africa and in South America, and working with young people. We've always sponsored people from diverse backgrounds who are engaged with our business through our partnership with the university, and we've always supported that. And so I think that a general sense of justice in the supply chain, corporate social responsibility, how does that affect the supply chain, and how does that affect that shift, that pivot away from hydrocarbons into where we're going?
Yeah, an exciting time then.
I think so. I've always loved my life. I've always loved the industry, and I've always liked working hard. And for me, if I can remain relevant, if I'm not some doddering old fool saying rubbish, but if I remain relevant, I would say that's probably the key for me. And then I have a son now, 17. He's going out in the world, making sure he's got the right standards, the right ideas, knowing what he wants to do. He's going to do economics. His choice, not mine. So I think it is an exciting time. Yes.
Francis, thank you so much. I could talk to you all day, but I appreciate we don't have that much time. Thank you so much for being on the Business Spotlight. Really appreciated it. If anyone wants to find out about Abis Energy, they just have a Google or a LinkedIn and
yes, whatever. Yeah. But I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Hope I didn't prattle on too much.
Not at all. That's what it's all about.
And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.